So House Bill 1793, what's some of the stuff that came out of that? If we don't have this EV charging request denied within 60 days, they're saying that it's automatically approved, right? So that's a big deal. We know that we can create new parking spaces in common areas to account for this, right? So that's something that's new for our associations. We also know that associations may install electric vehicle charging stations in common elements for the use of all owners, right? So, that's something that we're working on. And then costs. So what happens with the cost? And I think that this is really an important piece, is that what happens legally. And we've worked with and consulted with some of the best attorneys that we believe in the Washington area, some of them like Miller Nash, if you're familiar with that law firm, because we want to make sure that the information that we're providing is accurate. And this is it's an interpretation. But one of the things that really comes up is that if you don't allow that person to install the electric vehicle charging station, then the association can be fined up to $1,000 and all of their attorney's fees if they win. Now that little line becomes really, really important. All attorney's fees. So what happens now? And some great lawyers that we work with have said this is going to create a ton of ambulance chasers, right? Because if I get all my attorney's fees, then why do I charge the client if I just go after it? It's kind of like you're working with condo defect, if you know Justin down there, right? Well, what do? They take those wind-driven rain claims, they go against the insurance, and they flip the bill for it, and they take 30%, right? Why do they do that? Because they know that there's a big payoff. And so what attorneys like to do, or what they say they will believe they would like to do, is go after associations who deny owners from being able to install electric vehicle charging stations, right? Huge liability on the association side. So what do we do to mitigate that? Because they don't have $2 million or even $300,000, depending on the size or the location or the power supply. Some associations have tons of power supply, and it won't cost them that. But what do we need to do? The first step is we need to get a load test done. Why do we need to get a load test? Well, we need to get a load test done so that we know how much power is being used at the buildings. I was meeting with an association yesterday, and they said, well, we have a bid from somebody. And I was like, okay, cool. So you already have a load test. And they're like, no, we don't have a load test. I was like, well, then how do you have a bid? Because if you don't have a load test, you don't know what power is pulling, and you don't even know what kind of charger you should be installing, right? Because once we have a load test, we need to get the electrical engineering done. Once we have the electrical engineering, we now know how to build the system. And let me tell you why this is really important. Because there is an amazing project called EverCharge. EverCharge is a level 2 charger, which is what should be in any association. And here's the cool thing. I can take 6 units and put them on one circuit, right? Which that means that on one circuit, I can have 6 chargers. Now, to put that in perspective, if I have to put maybe a charger on a circuit, if I'm using an Everflow or something to that effect. So it can really save on the infrastructure costs. But we don't know that until we do a load test and until we do electrical engineering. So bringing it back around full circle, what happens, right, when that person says, I want to put in my electric vehicle charging station, and I understand the laws, and that, you have to approve this for me. You can't deny this, or here's the penalties. What are you going to say to that person? Or when you deny it and that person goes crazy? Because every association has one, at minimum, who goes crazy, right? It's just the way they are. And so what you don't want that to do is really blow up. So the load tests, very inexpensive, very simple to have done. The infrastructure, the electrical engineering, depending on the size of the building, but anywhere between 5 and 15 grand. Not a huge expense, right? So we got the electrical engineering done, we pull the permit. Why do we pull the permit? Because what we have found is that things are constantly changing with the municipalities, and it only costs us about $40 to renew the permit year after year. But we have it in place, we have the plan, and then from there we can get true and accurate costs. Because you might be able to go in and say, hey, we got a bid from company X, Y, and Z, but they didn't do a load test, they didn't do this. They're just guessing at what all of those costs are going to be. And you go into an association and they say they're going to put in a new panel and they can only put 14 chargers on a panel. Well, if we can multiply that by 6, how much money do we save the association infrastructure-wise? Tons and tons and tons of money. It also means that we can get more people chargers faster instead of having to phase the projects out at slower paces. So these things really enable us to be successful and provide our customers with that incredible customer experience. And that's what we really want to be able to do. In this business, it should be only level 2 chargers. That should be what's going in to multifamily type properties. So as the board goes through this and as they look at these things and as they look at the penalties and as they look at the assessments and they look at where they're going, they need to just keep in mind that this is going to happen. And it's not about 2 chargers. It's not about 3 chargers. It's about every single unit is going to need a charger. Like, that's just the reality of what's going to happen. And the other thing is that you want to have control over what type of charger is going in because of maintenance and theft of the wire arms and all of those things that go into it. So we really want to be proactive because this is going to hit you guys. The more that time ticks off the clock, the more it's going to hit you. The more your associations are prepared, right, the better they're going to be and the more they're going to love your company because they're going to be like, hey, these guys brought it to our attention. They know what's going on. I included in page 15 just a summary of the bill. So, if you don't have it, or if you're sharing it with your board or whatever you have going on, just a great breakdown of what's happening so that you can share that legislation with them. And here's the deal. As long as the association, and this is what the legal teams have come back and said, as long as the association is taking forward progress steps to address this, they're not going to be in violation when they turn that person down for providing the infrastructure. Because you don't want a whole bunch of extension cords rolling out the windows and people tripping and just all of that nonsense. But so you get the load test, you get the electrical engineering done, now you get your permit in place, and then you say, you know what, we don't have the money now, but in 2026 we're going to do phase 1. We're going to do 100 spots. And then next year we're going to do 100 spots, or however many there are in the association. Just break it up, and then that way those people know, okay, it's coming and it's going to be done. So that's pretty simple and that's pretty straightforward. And permits are pretty inexpensive. Anywhere between 40 and 60 bucks is about how that works. So snow removal. One of the things that we talk about is snow removal, and we talk about slip and falls, and we talk about what that looks like in the association. And some of the things that we want to look at is the budget for snow removal services. So I'm sure you've all had snow service at your property at some point in time. And a lot of times what happens is that budget just gets blown, right? You're like, oh my God, how did this cost so much? How do I budget for this? What we find a lot of times is that associations will say, hey, we're going to throw $1,500 in there. We're going to throw $2,000 in there. And they don't really understand what the cost of the snow and ice is going to be. So one of the things that I'm going to help you do today is I'm going to help you put together an item so that you can budget for snow removal and de-icing services appropriately. One of the things that we do is we provide expert witness testimony in court cases with slip and falls, okay? And so when we provide that, one of the things that we see every single year, year in and year out, is that we have slip and falls on multifamily properties. Part of the reason is because they never get de-iced. De-icing typically doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen because it's not in the budget. And so when it's not in the budget, it doesn't get done. Or we have a maintenance guy on staff who's out throwing down de-icer on the walkways, the stairways, so on and so forth. And when he's out doing that, what happens when it's snowing? Well, he doesn't want to come into work. Or maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't get the whole area. But what we find... What's that?
Or he can't get there.
Or he can't get there, right? So what we find is there's a lot of elderly folks in our associations, and when somebody slips and falls, who's responsible? Who's liable for that? Well, at the end of the day, when it goes to court, it's typically the association, right? That's who's going to get sued. There is 1 million slip and falls year in and year out related to snow and ice removal, and the average cost of a slip and fall is $48,000. So you can see there is a big cost to that for the association. So how do we mitigate that? How do we do that? Well, we want to have weather monitoring. What we don't want to do is just have all these random services and all these days de-iced when we don't need it to be serviced. What we know is that in the Seattle market, greater Seattle area, we're going to see 28 freezing days on average per year. What we can know is that out of those 28 days, about 20 of them have moisture. When there's moisture, that creates a slip and fall opportunity. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we're de-icing on those days. The other thing is that when it snows in Seattle, it doesn't snow continuously like in other states. It just dumps a whole bunch all at once. So anything over 7 inches is considered a blizzard, right? That's basically the threshold. So basically, every time it snows, we get a blizzard, right? So that's very tough. Our streets aren't maintained, things aren't taken care of. So what is this going to cost? How do I know the service is going to be done right? And what does the property look like? So one of the things we do is we call snow staking, right? We want to make sure that the parking lot is staked, just little stakes that are about yay high. They go where the speed bumps are. If you have the speed bumps that are temporary that can be pulled in and out, right? You don't want those ripped off. We want to mark the fire hydrants, want to mark the curb lines, right? So there's not a bunch of damage. You want a company that's going to come out and take pictures of the curbs, of the speed bumps, of the garbage enclosures, because those are always the things that get damaged and broken. So you want to make sure that those things are in the file before and after, right? But when it comes down to the snow removal and the weather monitoring, how do we know that the service actually was valid and needed? Well, NOAA provides weather reports. They provide hydraulic weather reports. And these are pretty cool because what it does is it shows the weather and it shows the temperature, and then it has a little green line that comes through and it shows the moisture content. And when the air and the moisture cross, you know you've got freezing temps. And then you know that the service was warranted because somebody could potentially slip and fall, right? So what we want to do is make sure that when we are working with a contractor that we require weather monitoring on every single site. So what does that look like? Hey, as part of your invoice, I need to see a weather report. So at our office, all they do all day long when it's in these kind of temperatures is they pull weather reports, they include them with the invoices. That way, you know that the services were actually warranted, because without that, you don't know that it was warranted. It's also great in case of a slip and fall, right? Because it's going to be able to tell us, hey, did this slip and fall have to happen? Should it have happened? And were we prepared? And did we service appropriately for this particular event? The next thing is we want to have technology that tracks it. Wouldn't you like to be able to see the condition of your property in the snowstorm? Real time. Because when it snows, I'm sure you get 1,000 calls of when is somebody come clear my lot? When is somebody going to be here? Are they going to show up? I didn't see them show up. I was watching my Ring camera. I never saw anybody drive by. Right? These are all the things they love to say. We provide that real-time data because you know when they're on site. We do everything through GeoTrack. So I can actually pull up a GeoTrack because we use Samsara in our vehicles. I can pull it up in a Walmart parking lot and I can show you where the truck is in the parking lot. I can show you what time it was there. I can show you how long it was on site. That kind of technology is great. It makes you look amazing, right? Because you go back to the association, you're like, actually they were there. They were there at 4 a.m. It's just continued to snow, right? If we think about this last event that we had last year, at 1 o'clock in the morning on the night of Christmas, coming into the day after Christmas, it was like the snow was going away. And our team had a meeting at 4 o'clock in the morning and they're like, yep, it's just gonna be a trace. Nothing's gonna hit trigger. It's gonna go away. Let all the guys go home. Let everybody know they don't have to work. At 6 o'clock, we had 6 inches on the ground. And it was call everybody in, get everything serviced, right? Because you can never predict the weather. You can never predict what's going to happen. So you want that technology to be able to make you look good and validate that the services actually happened when they said that they were supposed to happen. That vendor portal is also really nice because you're able to log in and you can see exactly what's happening with your property, real time. Hey, it was cleared, it was serviced, we're good to go. So what does this mean for you? How do you budget for that? And so one of the things that I like to just go through is just a quick scenario to just show you how to forecast and how to budget for these items with your association. So the average snowplow can produce 50,000 square feet per hour. So if you think about that, you know that if a property has 50,000 square feet of property, or just a little bit over an acre is 43,560 square feet, you know that you've got 1 hour of service. What we find in the Seattle market is that the average plow company wants to charge between $200 and $300 per hour. That's basically what their bids work out to be. So just for the sake of budgeting, you could figure that 45,000 square feet, 50,000 square feet is going to take 1 hour. So you know that charge is going to be $300. Now that gives you the number. If you think of how many times a property gets plowed in the Seattle market, it's usually 5 times a year. That's basically the average. You get 5 plow services. So now you know that that is $1,500 that you need to budget for plowing the parking lot. But now you've got to de-ice it, like we said, 20 times. So what does that mean? That means that we need to budget for that expense. Well, 1 acre, or 50,000 square feet, just as for the sake of this, is about 80%, the de-icing cost is about 80% of the plow price. So it breaks down to $240 approximately. So if you take that and you multiply that by the 20 services that you need to service that client throughout the year, you come down to $4,800. You add those two together, you get $6,300. $6,300 is basically your cost per acre. That's what you can budget for an association. So if you have a 10-acre property, $63,000. If you have a 1-acre property, $6,300. That quickly enables you to understand how to budget for that service. And it's not happening until they get sued. And when they get sued and they pay that big claim, maybe the insurance pays. Maybe, right? Like sometimes, because we deal with this all the time, like sometimes they deny coverage, right? What happens when they deny coverage? Or what happens when you don't get the contractor's insurance, or the contractor doesn't indemnify on behalf of the association? So one of the things that we want to have in that contract is an indemnification clause where that contractor indemnifies the association on behalf of that. Now, there's not a lot of 10-acre properties out in this area. The majority of your properties, 4 or 5 acres. That's pretty average of what you'll be able to spend. And what we know is that the winters get worse and worse and worse in this market, right? They are always getting more and more snow. And we've seen it later in the year. It used to be November, December. Now we're seeing a lot of snowfall February, end of season, and they're bigger, right? Our average snowfall has actually increased. If we go back 5 years, in Seattle it was 2.1 inches. Now we're at like 10.5. So, you know, you've got a lot more to deal with. It's becoming more and more prevalent in association mapping. Then the other thing is that we want to have these nice site maps created. So like on page 24,
it's like Eugene in the Excel training.
it's a rabbit hole. So we've got this snow mapping here. You want to have a map of every property. The reason is you don't want people piling snow at the top of the parking lot. You don't want them piling it on top of drains, right? We want to make sure that when it melts off, it doesn't come down and, you know, create more slipping, right? If they pile the snow at the top of the parking lot, at the top of the hill, or if they randomly place snow piles throughout the property, people can't get out, people get plowed in, and, you know, it just becomes a nightmare for every single one of those owners. So we want to make sure that we have snow piles delineated on here. We want to make sure that nothing is in front of a garbage enclosure. We want to make sure that nothing's by a speed bump, nothing's by a fire hydrant. And you want to make sure that your association and all your people get this, because it shows where the snow is being plowed, which direction it's being plowed in. And that really is beneficial for the association. The other thing is we want to have MSDS cut sheets, right? We want to make sure that we know what chemicals are going down on the property. So really important, a lot of contractors out here use calcium chloride. You want to stay away from the rock salt. You go out to the property, you see the sidewalks are all chewed up. It's because rock salt's been applied. So anyways, that gives you the numbers that you've got there to create a budget, if that works for you. One of the recommendations we have with asphalt is that when you're doing your capital asphalt projects, try to put them on hold. because at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of infrastructure work that happens on the EV side anyways. So if you're going to pave an area and then you're going to have to cut or trench right across it in 2 years, what's the point in doing major asphalt repairs when you're going to have to tear it up and redo it anyway? The other thing is that your seal coat, what's the point of doing the seal coat if you're just going to have to tear up portions of the parking lot anyways? So those are things that maybe you take and you budget them together. One of the things that we do recommend that you do every single year is that you crack seal the parking lot every single year, because what happens in Washington is the rain comes down and it goes through all of those cracks and it gets underneath the asphalt into the substrate surfaces and it deteriorates them. So that is the number one preventative measure that you can take every single year on your properties, is just crack seal them to make sure that the water doesn't go down and travel down beneath that substrate surface. If you figure it, the average cost of crack seal is anywhere between $1 and $1.50 a linear foot. So if you think about it, your first year of doing it might be $2,700, $3,000. But after that, it's probably under $500 every single time that you crack seal. It'll save your parking lots. It'll reduce the amount of alligatoring. It'll reduce the cost. If you think about that $1 a foot versus the $450 to $750 a square foot that you're going to pay for patch and pave, it's going to save your associations a ton of money. And again, it's going to make you look really, really good to your associations. The other thing is, in the seal coat, we always recommend that you use Armor A100, right? The reason is because it's not diluted, it's not cut down, it's not 50% water, and that's going to ensure that the seal coat product is really top of the line. And then as far as marking paint goes, we want to be using Ennis marking paint, right? It's a DOT approved marking paint. It's top of the line, best stuff out there. And that seal coat, when you do it, should last 5 to 7 years, right? That should be about what you can expect. Your parking lot striping should last about 1 to 2 years. But again, the most important part and the thing that we really believe in is getting that crack seal out. One of the things I've included just in the back is just an asphalt RFP costing guide. And this is kind of cool because it gives you the cost for paving, sidewalks, concrete grinding, seal coating. And when you ask for these prices individually, the cool thing is that you can start to analyze them. You can throw them in an Excel sheet, you can put graphs on them, and you can start to know right off the bat, like, hey, TransBlue charges X, Rainier Asphalt charges X, Nye Enterprise charges X. And so now you know, before the bid is even there, what to expect cost-wise. And it's an amazing budgeting tool, because all you need to do is just pull the square footages. And it only takes, 30 minutes to pull the square footage on a building. And now you can give an association an exact cost pretty much for what that vendor is going to charge. And you can say, hey, we really like working with these guys. This is what it's going to cost approximately. And that is really a powerful tool as you're beginning to manage these processes, manage these RFPs, and really take care of your clients. So anyways, in conclusion, thank you guys for your time today. I've provided some sample brochures that I'll leave out, and I've provided some sample RFP documents for electric vehicle charging, so that if you're looking at that, you can just take a look, and it provides you that sample of what a government proposal would look like, what a commercial proposal would look at. You can take it, you can fill in the blanks, you can utilize it to shoot out to your contractors if you so wish. You can build templates off of it. All of that is available. If you are interested in having any properties quoted for snow removal or asphalt or EV or anything like that, Mark is here, and he is more than happy to take a list of your properties, and he can turn those bids around for you 24, 48 hours if you guys would like. Any other questions that you might have? Cool. Well, thank you very much. We'll grab these forms, we'll leave them out for you, and then we'll let you guys get back to your day. But thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.